Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandanam Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana 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 Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Jai Jai Radha Madhav Kunj Bihari Jai Radha Madhav Kunj Bihari Jai Radha Madhav Kunj Bihari Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramanta Parvijagacharya Shtotarjita Shri Srimad Shila Bhai Chandan Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shri Gopal Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Devi Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Rani Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Harinama Sankirtan Ki Jai Grandharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Samsthapak Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Go Premanande All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga Jai Shri Prabhupada Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate Dhanamajnanadhibhisah Kalau Nashta Drishamesha Puranarko Thunodita Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, Chapter 1, texts 52 and 53. Please repeat. Evam vimarshya tam papam yavat atmani darshanam pujayam asa vai shaurihi bahu mana purahasaram evam vimrishyatam papam yavad atmani darshanam pujayam asa vai shaurir bahumana purasaram evam vimrishyatam papam yavad atmani darshanam pujayamasa vai shauri bahumana purasaram evam vimrishyatam papam yavad atmani darshanam pujayamasa vai shauri bahumana purahasaram. Evam vimrishyatam papam yavadatmani darshanam pujayamasa vai shaurir bahumana purasaram. Evam vimrishyatam papam yavad atmani darshanam pujayam asa vai shaurir bahumana purasaram. Evam vimrishyatam papam yavad atmani darshanam pujayam asa vai shaurir bahumana purahasaram. Evam vimrishyatam papam yavat atmani darshanam pujayam asa vai shaurir bahumana purahasaram. Matajis. Evam vimrishyatam papam yavadatmani darshanam pujayamasa vai shaurir bahumana purahasaram. Okay. Evam, in this way, vimrishya, after contemplating, tam, unto Kamsa, papam, the most sinful, yavat, as far as possible, atmani darshanam, with all the intelligence possible within himself. Pujayamasa, praised, vai, indeed, shaurihi, vasudeva, bahumana, offering all respect, purahasaram, before him. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. After thus considering the matter as far as his knowledge would allow, Vasudeva submitted his proposal to the sinful Kamsa with great respect. Please repeat. After thus considering the matter as far as his knowledge would allow, Vasudeva submitted his proposal to the sinful Kamsa with great respect. It seems there's no purport here. We can go on. We can say some things later, but we'll go on now. Text number 53. Do you have it before you? Should we chant? Okay, I'll chant. Prasanna bhojo nrisangsam nirapatrapam manasadhuyamanena vihasannidam abravit. Okay, this Prasannavadana Ambhoja means Vasudeva who externally presented himself as if very happy. Nrishamsam, unto the most cruel person, Nirapatrapam, shameless Kamsa, Manasa, with the mind, Duyamanena, which was full of anxiety and sorrow, Vihasan, smiling externally, Idam abravit, and spoke as follows. Translation: Vasudeva's mind was full of anxiety because his wife was facing danger. But in order to please the cruel, shameless, and sinful Kamsa, he externally smiled and spoke to him as follows. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes one must act duplicitously in a dangerous position, as Vasudeva did to save his wife. The material world is complicated, and to execute one's duties, one cannot avoid adopting such diplomacy. Vasudeva did everything possible to save his wife for the sake of begetting Krishna. This indicates that one may act duplicitously for the purpose of saving Krishna and his interests. According to the arrangement already foretold, Krishna was to appear through Vasudeva and Devaki to kill Kamsa. Vasudeva therefore had to do everything to save the situation. Although all the events were prearranged by Krishna, a devotee must try his best to serve the purpose of Krishna. Krishna himself is all-powerful, but it is not that a devotee should therefore sit idly and leave everything to him. This instruction is also found in Bhagavad Gita. Although Krishna was doing everything for Arjuna, Arjuna never sat down idly as a non-violent gentleman. Rather, he tried his best to fight the battle and be victorious. Om ajnanatimirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yutaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Madgavirapi Gopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadi Tadaiva Sampayaha Pitva Rishyayustat Priyajanaha. Let's go back to text number 52 for a moment, because there is some commentary there by the predecessor acharyas. First of all, Yavad Atmanidarshanam means Swaprajnavadhi Vicharya. In other words, Sridhar Swami says, Vasudeva was considering this matter in accordance with whatever spiritual insight he had, according to the limit, avati of his spiritual insight. Vamshidhara Acharya, who is Sridhar's commentator, he explained some of these terms. Nrishamsam means kruram, nrishamsam, cruel. Nrishangso dhatuka krura ityamaraha. He's quoting Amara Kosha to justify that. Whenever we want to say something, we have to justify what we say, either with reference to a standard dictionary or to the standard authorities. Pujyamanena tapyamanena. Here, by the word pujyamana, which can mean worshipping, or as Prabhupada translates, offering great respect, Vamshidhara says it means tapyamanena, tolerating, being burnt. So, vihasanniti bahyanandam aha. Externally, he's speaking this while smiling, as to show great pleasure, ananda. Mahatam satyam avikleshe no vikritihi krodhari rupa iti bhava. The idea here is that among great personalities, it's the fact that even when they're in great difficulty, facing great challenges, there's no change in their consciousness, changes such as anger. This is the commentary of Sridhar Swami and his own some commentator, Vamshidhara. Jiva Goswami says that Vasudeva considered as much as he could in the perplexing situation. He worshipped the sinful Kamsa with great respect. Great respect. This means he praised him, as Prabhupada said already. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says Vimrishya means contemplating, because Vimrishya also means to touch something, or to fondle, or to stroke something. Vimrishya means here contemplating. After carefully considering the options used by using his intelligence to its full capacity to determine the correct path, Vasudeva began to praise the most sinful Kamsa. Kamsa here is described as, papam. He's not named, tam papam. That sin personified, you might say. Sin means it's another thing. It's not Kamsa, but here he's equated with the thing. So sometimes they say in English, you are what you eat. So in a real way, you are what you do. If you commit sins, you are sin. Prabhupada will try to quote Prabhupada about this in a moment. Well, we can add something here, because this brings to mind a verse just after the one we just chanted. Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate. That's 1st Canto, Chapter 3, Text 44. Tatra kirtayato vipra viprarshe bhuritejasaha aham chadhyagamam tatra nivishtastaраnugrahat soham vah shravayashyami yadhadhitam yathamati. That means, O learned Brahmanas, when Shukadeva Goswami recited the Bhagavatam there in the presence of Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus, by his mercy, I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now, I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned it from him and as I've realized it. Yatha adhitam yatha mati. As much as we've studied, that much we can realize. If we don't study, we won't realize anything. We'll continue to have all the same problems, we'll continue to have all the same conflicts, and all the same misconceptions and speculations and other anarthas of every sort. Srila Prabhupada said books are the basis. And somebody who really takes that seriously, as Srila Prabhupada did, he was serious enough to lose sleep about it. Do we? Just for us, sitting here half a century later, Srila Prabhupada stayed up all night, every night, writing these books. Because these books are the basis. And Prabhupada knew that. He went through the experience of Gaudiya Math, and how Gaudiya Math was ripped apart, even before his departure. Sound familiar? So what to speak of afterwards? We know it just disintegrated. ISKCON has also gone through its difficulties. In some respects, you can say ISKCON has also crystallized into its various factions within the institution, still going on. But the point is that if we've realized something, then we can avoid so much hassle and so much distraction and so many problems. Yatha dhitam yathamati. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport in that verse that, of course, one cannot learn Bhagavatam from a bogus, hired reciter whose aim of life is to earn monies in order to enjoy his family life. No one can learn from Srimad Bhagavatam from who is associating with persons engaged in sex life. What to speak of personally engaging in that way? Even associating with people who are engaged in sex life disqualifies us from learning Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very strict. How is this so? Srila Prabhupada is paraphrasing in his purport further the maybe Briharanyaka Upanishad, or maybe it's the Chandogya Upanishad, I don't remember, that the secret of the knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who's not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Do you see the connection between Krishna consciousness and Varnashram Dharma? We mentioned this yesterday also. Yesham tuantagatam papam, without becoming purified of all of our anarthas, especially in the realm of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and regulating our lives according to the injunctions of Shastra, including our material lives. Material life means everybody eats and everybody sleeps. Many people will have to mate, and pretty much everyone also defends. Whether we want to call it fighting or defending. There's a whole, multi-billion-dollar industry centered around security. Security. Every 10 feet we have a security camera. Especially if you live in the People's Republic of China. There it's every 2 feet. So, this is animal life, but human beings have animal propensities that have to be purified, and the way they are purified is by following the directions about how to do these things in such a way that you don't go down, you go up. That's the point of this small passage here in this purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's very important, very, very important. I'll read it again. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. Well, first of all, no one can give rapt attention. This is the point. We're to hear Srimad Bhagavatam with rapt attention. Sometimes when the ladies were making garlands in the class, Srila Prabhupada would stop that. He didn't want it. Because the little noise that's made by pushing a needle and thread through a flower was too much. Why was he like that? Because he saw the same example of his own spiritual master. Somebody leaned over and asked him a question in class, and he was trying to just help, and his spiritual master chastised him immediately. That's mercy. And he took it, and he didn't forget it. And he pushed it on us as well, the same thing. So, to hear with rapt attention, we have to have a pure mind. To have a pure mind, you have to have pure activities. To have pure activities, you have to eat, sleep, mate, and defend in the proper manner. That's a very important point here. Sub-point. Another thing we can look at here is Vasudeva appears to have been a little bit duplicit, and Prabhupada's purport amplifies this in the next text. So maybe we should just go on to that. Well, not only duplicit, but what is he showing to Kamsa? Pujayam asa bahumanena. What does it mean? Anybody remember? With great respect. He's praising Kamsa. Dante nidhaya trinakam padayor nepatya kritva chikakushatam etaraham bravimi. Prabodhananda Saraswati tells us, I'm taking a straw in my teeth and I'm bowing down at your feet 100 times in plaintive language. What does he say? He sadhavaha sakalameva vihaya durat. Oh, my dear saintly persons, get rid of everything you've ever heard before. Forget about all of it. Just throw it all out. Chaitanya Chandra Charane Kurutanudagam. And just love the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the approach Prabhupada many times has told us. This is how we deal with people. This is how we especially preach Krishna consciousness. In other words, as is written in stone, Tranadapi Sunichena Turodava Sahishnana. We already mentioned Tapyamanena means Sahishnana. Amanina, Manadena. That's the hard part, isn't it? But if we can do it, Kirtaniya Sadaharihi. All right, text 53. Prasanna Varanam Bhojo. With happy, blooming lotus face. That's really what he's saying here. Nrishamsam nirapatrapam manasa duyamanena. Even though his mind was reeling with all kinds of anxieties. Can you imagine, married men here? Your wife is about to be killed. How are you going to feel about that? So, brahmacharis, maybe, if someone is about to kill your guru, how are you going to feel? So, wife is also guru. Every householder knows this. So, manasa duyamanena, his mind was full of anxiety, but vihasannivam idam abravit, he spoke to Kamsa. So Prabhupada's first thing, sometimes one must act duplicitously in a dangerous position, as Vasudeva did to save his wife. That's the first point. And the second point, why do you have to act duplicitously? Because this material world is complicated. It's more complicated. Life is more complicated than the Rajagopuram at Srirangam. And Vasudeva did everything possible to save his wife, obviously. This indicates that one may act duplicitously for the purpose of saving Krishna and Krishna's interests. We're all engaged in serving Krishna's interests. That's the only thing that servants do. Their only concern is their master. So, this is the point of bhakti. It's not necessary to sweep the room in the spiritual world, because there's no dirt there. Or if there is dirt, it's chintamani dirt. It's not really contaminated. But, Lakshmi Sahasrashata Sambrama with all hurry and flurry, they're running about doing everything they can to make sure he's happy, Govindam. So Krishna himself is all-powerful, but it's not that a devotee should therefore sit idly and leave everything to him. Prabhupada, many times, we've heard, oh, Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord, you can do everything, and you've even admitted yourself that all these men are already killed by you, So let me just sit here and, wait it out, smoke some ganja and watch. That's not the devotional attitude. Devotional attitude is let me do something. Let me do my part. Nimitta matra bhava. So, Sridhar Swami here on text 53 says, Tasya vishvasaya vikasiti mukham bhojaha prahasan abravit. He spoke with a face like a blooming lotus flower in order to instill some faith in Kamsa, so that Kamsa would trust him, basically. Actually, Vishwas means trust. So this is his purpose. Sub-commentator, Jiva Goswami says, Vasudev's mind was full of anxiety because his wife was facing danger, but in order to please the merciless and shameless Kamsa, these are the two adjectives used to describe Kamsa. He had no mercy and he had no shame. Nrishamsam nirapatrakam. He faced Kamsa with a joyful face, blossoming like a lotus flower. He says the same thing. And externally smiled. He spoke again to the merciless Kamsa. Punar abravit is an alternative version to idam. Punar abbravet, rather, is an alternative version to idam abravit. With a joyful face, blooming like a lotus, he spoke. Prasarya vadanam bhojam is an alternative reading. This makes the meaning clear. He made a show of inner happiness to convince Kamsa. Actually, his mind was completely disturbed. Even a devotee's mind sometimes may be completely disturbed. Even a devotee of Vasudeva's stature, he's actually eternally liberated. Eternal, we call them ragatmika bhakta, nitya parishad, in the spiritual realm. But when their minds are agitated, it's not the same exactly as when our mind gets agitated. That we should know. Still, Prabhupada is giving us permission here. You can be duplicit if you have to. This is sometimes a problem. We have a problem with this, especially the more Brahminical persons. They don't really like this so much. Let's hear what Chanakya Kautilya has to say about this in his Niti Shastra, chapter 7.12. Natyantam saralair bhavyam gatva pashya vanasthalim chidyante saralas tatra kubjas tishtati padapaha. The trees in the forest, if they're growing straight and very nice, they're the ones that get cut down first for lumber. If the tree is all knotty and gnarled and crooked, nobody cares. It stays there. So what does he draw from this? What conclusion? Natyantam saralair bhavyam. It's not so good to be always just simple and straight in this world, because the world is not simple and straight. We've already decided that. There are people who are crooked. They have to be dealt with. That's when you're dealing with a right versus wrong situation. For example, Sanatana Goswami in Madhya Lila chapter 20, we know the story. First of all, he had to bribe the Muslim jail keeper to get out of jail. And, he actually lied. He said, I'm going to Hajj. I'm going to Makkah to make Hajj. The Muslim was so impressed he started crying. And Sanatana Goswami also, he had to do what he had to do. Similarly, he gave him 7,000 gold coins. That's a pretty persuasive amount of money. Anyway. Then he crossed the Ganges, and again, when he came to that inn, his servant Ishan had some few more gold coins. So he and the servant spent the night there, and they were a little suspicious, because if someone shows too much devotion, sometimes we get a little doubtful. Why? Ati bhakti chorasya lakshanam. Too much devotion is the sign of a rascal, the sign of a thief. So Sanatana Goswami, being a former minister, he was thinking there's got to be a reason for this. There has to be some material explanation for a material person to show so much devotion. So he concluded that they were going to kill him. And sure enough, this man had a very expert astrologer, and the astrologer told him, look, he's got so many gold coins. So, India hasn't changed much in the last 500 years. So Sanatana Goswami told him to get rid of the coins, and he dismissed his servant and he continued. And the innkeeper was so happy that he helped them to get across to Varanasi. So there are different moral dilemmas we have to face. Right versus wrong, that's an easy one. What happens if it's right versus right? What does that mean? Let's look at this. Right versus right paradigms include things like truth versus loyalty. I had to go through this once in a GBC committee that valued fidelity over truth. So, individual needs versus community needs. This is a big difference between Asia in general and the West in general. The West is privileging individuality, Asia privileges the community. Short-term needs that are urgent can't be like Vasudeva. Short-term interest, but it was very important. His wife was going to die. Versus long-term interests. What's the long-term interest? Krishna has to come into this world. That wasn't this kind of dilemma, but sometimes we face this. Justice versus mercy. This is another one. Tamal Krishna Goswami in Mumbai, there was one devotee, I won't name him, but God brothers know who he was. So he was enlisting so many members, and he was collecting fabulous amounts of money from the wealthy persons in Mumbai, and he was putting a lot of that money south. What does that mean? He was pocketing so much money. So, south means it goes in your pocket. So, they were tolerating for some time, and they were trying to correct the situation, and again and again and again. You give a person a long rope, and if he still isn't rectifying, what are you supposed to do about it? So all the devotees were so upset with this, but everybody was just itching to get him out. And Tamal Krishna Goswami was usually the one who had to take these difficult tasks to Prabhupada. So that's what he did. And Prabhupada told him, now this person, he's not even with us anymore. He's living on the beach with some bogus yogi at Juhu. And this bogus person is teaching him how to put a coin in one ear and pull it out of the other ear. And he's still collecting money in the name of ISKCON. What are we to do with this person? And Prabhupada said, you do not understand the mercy of Lord Nityananda. It is infinite. That's pretty extreme. This person had done some really bad things. Drugs, money, you name it. Every scandal that he was guilty of it. And still Prabhupada was not hesitant to kick him out. But in the case of another disciple I won't name, who associated too much with the Babaji's at Radhakund and had some wrong ideas about ISKCON and therefore Prabhupada, Prabhupada immediately threw him out of the movement, sent a letter to all the temples and said, this person is persona non grata, don't speak to him, have nothing to do with him, he's out, he's an envious snake. So a pure devotee has the empathy to know whether to show mercy or to show justice, when and how. So this is a big one actually. Empathy is absolutely essential qualification for any devotee who deals with, other devotees. That's all of us. We have to have this empathy. And Krishna in chapter 6, text number 32 tells us, empathy is the characteristic of the best yogi. What's the verse? Huh? Yes. Atmopama means comparison with your own self. It's indirectly it's saying empathy. To know another person is very, very important. To be able to judge. We cannot judge other people. You cannot know what another person's motive is. It's not that you should not judge. You cannot judge. Keep it in mind all the time. That's an essential aspect of Trinat api sunichena turorivasishnana amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. To have the kind of humility that Lord Chaitanya has advised, we have to recognize what are our limitations. We all have limitations. If only everyone in the world was humble enough to admit, yes, I could be wrong here. I may be wrong. That's so hard to do, isn't it? I may be wrong. You may be right, I may be, and because what does it mean? It means I have to surrender unto you if I'm wrong. And that's the last thing we want to do. Dante nidhaya tranakam, with a straw in our teeth. Padayor nipatya. We have to fall at someone's feet and say, yes, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And then we have to work with that person somehow. You have to find a way. Prabhupada gave 2 major instructions at the end, just before he left this world, and they're instructions that are as relevant right here, right now, as they were in 1977. What are those instructions? Number 1, sustain this society as I have established all the standards. Just maintain them. We used to think, well, why did he say only maintain? We're supposed to expand everything, right? We were so passionate and naive and young. But now we can see how difficult it is just to maintain things, especially if you're an American. We mentioned it yesterday. Those of you who are here for the class, you already understand. The American disease is what? Change everything at all costs. So that's one thing. And the other thing Prabhupada said, he gave us the recipe. How to cooperate. He told us to cooperate amongst yourselves and sustain this movement. Dridhatu means sustenance. It's the root of the word dharma. By following Varnashram dharma, Prabhupada had hoped that we would, by embracing that instruction, Prabhupada had hoped that we would find the means with which to cooperate and purify our activities and thereby our minds and thereby our adhikar for Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada hoped that we would be able to sustain everything. We can each analyze how well we followed that instruction, both individually and collectively. But it was a very clear instruction that Prabhupada gave. Those 2 instructions. Number 1, maintain this movement. Number 2, cooperate. We have to do this. Just has to be done. And the only way it can be done? Humility. Be ready to offer all respect to someone else, to not expect it. If somebody abuses you, fine, tolerate it. What does Vasudev think in this circumstance? What does he think? Here it's this, he knows. Kamsa is Nrishamsam, Nirapatrikam, Papam personified. Sinful, shameless, cruel. And still he's bowing down with all, Pujayamasa, worshipping him, as it were, and offering all praise. This is what we have to do. If you want to enter into Krishna's Leela, especially this Mahaprabhu Leela, and this Salem, Tamil Nadu in 2023 is also a part of Mahaprabhu Leela. If you want to enter into it, this is the price you have to be ready to pay. You want diamonds? Or would you settle with cubic zirconia? That we asked the same question yesterday. What do you want? Yatechasi tatakuru. Krishna's not going to interfere with your independence. But you have to do something. I give this example many times when we're preaching in the villages, because the people take goats and sell the goats. That's their cruelty by proxy, you can say. The other day in where was it? Tachanulur. I saw a couple of men with a goat in between them on a motorcycle speeding off you know where. So I was telling these villagers that, you have to make decisions in life. What kind of decisions do you have to make? Responsible, informed decisions, and hopefully the right ones. Because human life is like an elevator, and the lift, the door of the lift only stays open for some time. You have to push a button before that door closes, otherwise you're going wherever these other people are taking you. In the same way, wherever the society is taking us, wherever our association is taking us, sangat sanjayate kama, that's where we're going. But Krishna consciousness means I'm taking charge now. I'm going to push the buttons, and I'm going to determine my destiny. But you've got a limited time in which to do it. It has to be now, because the door will shut. If you've been irresponsible, and you've, like these villagers who are just killing goats without thinking too much about their future, then when the elevator door opens, you see a room full of goats looking up at you. So, in this way, we have to cultivate our sensibility by hearing with rapt attention, and to qualify ourselves for doing that, we have to behave ourselves in the manner that is advised by Krishna very clearly in Bhagavad Gita and in other places, and according to the instructions of the spiritual master. They are very clear unless we really don't like them and don't want to accept them. So these different categories of right versus right paradigms, this causes us so much dilemma. And we have to consider these things very carefully. Sometimes in order to resolve any such moral dilemma, we have to choose the best, what does Prabhupada say, make the best of a bad bargain, or choose the optimal thing, we say. Optimal means it's not maybe ideal, but it's the best you can hope for given the circumstances. So, how do people do this? Basically, people in this world do this in three ways. They are utilitarian, that is to say, consequentialists. Whatever produces the greatest result for the greatest amount of people. This is a very popular ethic that people adopt. It's ends-based, it's fruitive mentality. It's actually fruitive activity. Then there's rule-based, this is like the Kantian categorical imperative, means, what would happen if everybody did what I am proposing that I do? What will happen? That's another way to look at our situation when we have an ethical dilemma. What if everybody was just like you? What kind of world would we live in? That's something to think about if you want to be humble. And then there's this, what the Christians call their golden rule. That means you have to treat everybody else the way you expect them to treat you. A very common sort of, So these are some of the values that we see. These are some of the ways that people adopt some strategy to deal with ethical dilemmas. Here Vasudeva has adopted his strategy, and being an eternal associate of the Lord, we have no problem with that. Ourselves, it's a different matter, because we're conditioned souls, and that's why we must be humble. Even if we're totally convinced that he's wrong and I'm right, or what she said is offensive and I'm the one who's the victim here, maybe it's not true. Jains have this idea. They call it, it's a core aspect of their philosophy. It's called syadvad, syadvada. Syat is actually a term we've heard. Syat Krishna Nama ityadi. It means it could be. It's a potential verb form. So the Jains, they look at life in this way, that maybe this is true. Maybe that, in other words, they always have this awareness that I could be wrong. It's a kind of humility, limited humility. So people are often also unaware of their shortcomings. This is a point that we have to. This is why we give people a long rope, so to speak, and this is why we tolerate. Because people can get so covered. There's like a mirror can be so covered There's so much dust covering a mirror, you don't even recognize it as a mirror anymore. There's no glass visible. It just looks like maybe a flat sheet of, particle board or something. People can become so covered like that. Visit North Korea. You can see some of them. These are the atheists. People who don't even believe in the soul. That's really covered. So we have to deal with them in a different way than we deal with people that we know understand what they're doing wrong. I'm going to quote one contemporary author who writes on this topic, Rushworth Kidder. He says, "An ethical denseness that sees no reason not to lie, that treats others as a means rather than an ends, and that elevates the self so far above the community that it fails to connect the values of the society around it. Such thinking may produce behavior that's both legal and acceptable and scientifically valid, but it doesn't comprehend the demands of moral rectitude, nor does it even recognize that there is such a thing as morality." This is what we're facing in the world today. And most of us are coming from this background. If we're born and raised in an urban, modern environment anywhere in the world, this is the mindset that we have to deal with in one form or another, to one degree or another. So ethical fitness means we have to be willing to we have to have the capacity to recognize the nature of particular moral challenges. The yoga school of Patanjali has a term for this. They call it, what is it? Dharmendriya. Literally translates as the sense of dharma. It's considered in that school a particular faculty that a wholesome, fully developed human being should have. If people don't have that, then that explains why the world is in the situation that it's in. So only a person who's ethically fit and has empathy and pure in character, as we've been describing, can identify the kind of moral challenge that presents itself, can seek the thing which is most close to the right thing, most approximate to the right thing, and can retain human warmth while doing this. That's a very important thing. No matter how important your work is, no matter how important your mission is, no matter how important you think yourself is, you think you are, we always have to be kind to others and show respect and concern for others. This is all part of what it means to be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. So we've all met, I won't go there. A civilized human being should have obedience to that sense of morality or that dharma that cannot be enforced and cannot be, persecuted. You can get away with things, but a really moral person is someone who he doesn't require that. All right, I don't want to get too far off track here. We're talking about Vasudeva and his moral dilemma and how he's dealing with it here. Maybe it's time to stop and ask if there are any questions. Otherwise, we can end here. Is there anyone have any questions or any comments? Dharmasya hina pashubhi samana, Hitopadesh tells us. Without a sense of dharma, we're just animals. And dharma is a very vast thing. And the world doesn't really have very clear sense of dharma, but Indians have some sense at least. Non-Indians have no sense. They have to be taught from scratch. That's the challenge facing all of you. today. You have to act on behalf of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because the future belongs to India, and you have to bring the rest of the world up because that is his mandate. Okay, any questions or any comments? Yes, Maharaj. I'm not able to hear.
My voice is
Yeah, okay.
Much of your talk was about the dilemma or the dharma sankat, mercy
Yes.
versus justice, and you came very strongly on the side of mercy. But it's
Maybe it's the battery, unless it's unidirectional. Maybe you can tell someone the question and the person can act as a relay runner. And sorry.
Hare Krishna.
you're addressing a perennial philosophical question with massive practical ramifications. Too much mercy and the rogues take advantage. Too much justice and everyone too tight and everyone feels oppressed. So it's anyway. Would you like to comment on that?
I want to first of all just reiterate, or rather emphasize something that I mentioned, which is how Prabhupada dealt with ideological deviation. You mentioned that yesterday. We should dilate on it, because in the case that I mentioned, in which Prabhupada threw this person out of the movement and said, you know, this person, devotee, came and asked Srila Prabhupada, give me your blessings that I can find a bona fide guru, if you can imagine someone saying that. He actually did that. And Prabhupada was so merciful to this person that he told him, you have my blessings that you will not find a spiritual master for billions of births. Now it's this one too. Hare Krishna. So, and of course he just, you know, he was thrown out of the movement. Prabhupada didn't do that with anyone. Only a couple of cases that Prabhupada did that, and all of them deal with ideological deviation. This is a point that you can confirm by consulting with Prabhupada's former servants and secretaries. They all have the experience that Prabhupada, nothing galvanized Srila Prabhupada's attention and practical action more quickly than philosophical deviation or the cancer of spiritual anarthas in our society and the wrong ideas. In 1970, if I'm not mistaken, that's when Srila Prabhupada formulated the GBC. He did so in response to one such deviation. Tamal Krishna Goswami told me that Prabhupada actually disbanded the GBC twice. Hard to believe in 2023. But he did that. And, you know, Prabhupada could tolerate anyone's moral failures, personal individual weaknesses and whatever. But if a person was actually intellectually distorted and not submissive and preaching and contaminating other people, Prabhupada would just cut him out. Since we quoted Chanakya, I might as well do so again. For the sake of the family, one member may have to be sacrificed. For the sake of the village, one family may have to be sacrificed. For the sake of the country, one village may have to be sacrificed. For the sake of the self, everything has to be sacrificed. So, Srila Prabhupada is very strict on this point. It's very important. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Yeah, this is why I mentioned it, because we don't really get any ethical training in ISKCON, do we? There is no Gaudiya Vaishnava ethic in our Shastras. You cannot have it because absolute truth is of the nature of simultaneous oneness and difference. It's very difficult to work with that. And that's why I emphasized or tried that it all depends on the spiritual master's empathy, or the empathy of an advanced devotee who has empathy. It really pivots around that, because Mahajano yena gata sapanta ityadi. Why does the Shastra keep telling us these things? I mentioned yesterday, in the absence of some definitive conclusion from Pratyaksha, Anuman, and even Shabda, what do we have to go by? It's Aitihim, it's the example given by the Shishtas, Shishtachara. That's what we have to take shelter of. And the best reason to accept a spiritual master's authority as superlative is this, that he alone has the empathy to understand when to give mercy, when to give justice. Of course, the spiritual master is not independent. He's himself subordinate to the Shastra, Shastra Yonitvat, or in other words, books are the basis. But the spiritual master has that kind of empathy, that at least he should. That we should not accept a spiritual master unless we see that he has this qualification. Because in chapter 632, Krishna says, he is the best of the yogis, in my opinion. That's what Krishna says. So this is how I process this huge question. It really comes down to that. Mahajana yena gata sapanta. Now, the problem is that in we mentioned factions. People have different gurus, and the gurus have different acharyas, have different opinions, but be a real acharya. Acharya means achinoti tu shastrartham. You're going to explain what the Shastra says. You can't explain something else that's non-shastric or that contradicts Shastra. Then you're not really an acharya. And it's an unfortunate fact that in Kali Yuga we see this. So-called gurus, but they're not actually acting as gurus. They're misleading people and creating social problems. So that's another thing. As far as judgment goes, I said already, you cannot judge, and yet at the same time you have to judge. That's another Achinta Veda Bheda maybe. Because the key word of Madhyama Adhikar is discrimination. Discrimination is just another synonym for judgment, a personal judgment. You have to make your own judgment on an individual, on a situation. Spiritual master, who is your spiritual master? It's an individual thing, and you need not share it with other people. Nowadays people are happy to share all their judgments on the internet. That's wrong. Or to pass judgment on other people, to assume the worst about other people, it's not good. We should assume the best, even if it looks like it's worst, until it's proven that there's a problem here. This is the point. I hope that's satisfactory. I'm just kind of, there's no end to it, really. There isn't. We can go on for months on this topic, and in fact we have to. Yeah, the work doesn't stop, and not that we don't do anything until we figure this out. Yeah. This is a very good point that I'll say, that throughout history we see there has often been conflict between the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas as classes, general classes. This is always going to be there, and it always has been there. Because the Brahmins, as I said, they're looking for the virtuous thing, they're looking for this philosophically, they have their way of viewing things. But swe adhikare yanishta saguna parikirtitaha. Everybody has his own adhikar. And according to that adhikar, he perceives the world in different ways. The Kshatriya sees things very differently. He has Ishvara Bhava. He's not afraid to rise to any challenge. And he's very practical bent, his intelligence. Vaishyas even more so. Shudras have their own lessons to teach us. We're all dasas here. Who are we going to learn from, except for the servants? So everybody has interest. This is another verse. Paraswa bhava karmani na prashamse na gardhayat. Another person's conditional nature and the activities that extend from that nature. Let's pay attention to the class instead of the microphone, please. A person's conditional nature and the activities that extend from his conditional nature, you should not criticize. Because if you criticize that person's conditional nature, what can he do about it? Nothing. This is nature. But if you praise him too much, then he also becomes too much infatuated and thinks it's more important than it is. So Krishna says, don't praise another person's conditional nature and activities. And don't criticize it either, because if you criticize it, he can't do anything. If you praise it, he becomes just too much giddy with the material energy. Instead, what are we going to do? Pashyan vishvatmakam pashyan prakritya purushena cha. We have to see everything has its place in this world. Every varna has its place, every ashram has its place, every individual personality type has its place. Everyone has a valid, valuable, and I want to say ontological, eternally fixed contribution to make to the society. We have to recognize that. The tendency in the Kanishta stages is that, my way is the only way, or at least the best way. And, the Brahmins, if they're thinking like this, then they always have challenges from the management. Because the management doesn't work like that. The management is there to execute. That is the key word of the Kshatriya. Execution. You've got to do something. And something for the upliftment and protection of others. It doesn't always fit so neatly. So we've seen this, not only in history, but we see it in our movement also. This, again and again, this problem comes up. So this is the importance of being humble again. We have to recognize everybody has a conditional nature and it's valid. And mine is not the be-all and end-all of existence either. But it is valid within its sphere. What is it that really galvanizes the absolute truth in terms of ground level reality? That is the order of the spiritual master. That's the only thing that can do this. And that's why ISKCON has crystallized in the various communities around various spiritual masters, because it's just the natural system. If you don't have a dictator, then you don't have a proper society, actually. It's a good thing. It has to happen. But it has to be based in Shastra and guided thereby. I don't want to keep rambling here. Any other questions or any comments? No. Amakal. Who's? Okay.
Thank you very much for your very valuable points in your lecture, Prabhu. I would like to add something to the discussion. I also read on the university level a little bit about ethics, and one can translate that into the 5 levels of consciousness, which is mentioned in Prabhupada's books. That the ethics of Annamaya is whatever my senses dictate, that is right, or the level of Pranamaya, whatever is good for the collective sense gratification, that is right, or the level of Manamaya, whatever Shastra says, that is right, or level of Vijnanamaya, whatever is good for the soul, that is right, and then level of Anandamaya, whatever Lord Krishna says, that is right. So I just wanted to add that into the discussion because maybe not all devotees here have heard that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we can end here. Unless any Maharaj or anyone else have any further comments. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.